And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday, March 12th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we are going to start off the show. We are going to talk about where the top two remaining quarterbacks will end up. Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. We'll get into that and some of the other quarterback moves as well. We'll talk about Daniel Jones. We mentioned it briefly yesterday on the show when the news broke, but we will talk about how that impacts the Colts situation with Anthony Richardson. But the main thing is talking about Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, as their choices have now narrowed down. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about some of the other wide receiver news, wide receiver deals. DeAndre Hopkins recently signed a one-year deal with the Ravens. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Chris Godwin re-signing with the Buccaneers. All of that. We'll go through a majority of the wide receiver deals. And then in the third part of the show, we'll talk about the Eagles. There were a handful of players that have left via free agency or trade, and we'll talk about the impact of that. We'll also talk about the 49ers. I will do a season overview of their season, as well as talk about a lot of the players that have left their team as well and the impact of that. And then we will talk about Gerrit Cole. We will get to some other news other sports news besides football, because there's just been so much going on, so much to cover. But we will talk about Gerrit Cole and the impact of his injury, as he is going to miss the 2025 season and he will undergo Tommy John surgery. So we will talk about the impact of that and how the Yankees will handle that. So, with that being said, let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson and where they could potentially end up. So, it seems like we are getting a clearer picture on where they could potentially go. It could very well come down to the Giants and the Steelers. And if one goes to one team, then the other is going to go to the other team. That's how I see it. Now, there are some other teams that could potentially come in and maybe sign one of them. You know, the Vikings. Right now, the only quarterback that is on their roster is J.J. McCarthy. So they could maybe look to bring in Aaron Rodgers. I could see Aaron Rodgers going to Minnesota, but I don't know about Russell Wilson. And you've been seeing on social media that the Vikings are a dark horse team to watch out for in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes, if you want to call it that. So, yeah, you got the Vikings. The Titans, I really don't know what they're doing. You know, they do have the number 1 overall pick. Do they trade it away on draft night? Are they going to take a quarterback? I mean, we'll see what happens, but they're another team that does need a quarterback. But I do think that the Giants and the Steelers, in one way or another, are going to end up with at least one of these guys. I think if Aaron Rodgers goes to the Steelers, the Giants are going to end up with Russell Wilson, and vice versa. When it comes to Russ, last year, he met with the Giants. They were thinking about bringing him in, but with the Steelers, when they came calling, he felt like he had a better opportunity with the Steelers, and I don't blame him. Because I think it was discussed with Russ that you're not guaranteed the starting job. It's going to be Daniel Jones. Now, eventually, Russ probably would have taken over because Daniel Jones didn't finish out the year with the Giants as the starter, and they ended up releasing him. And we'll talk about him in a little bit here. But with the Steelers, I guess it was made known to him, hey, you're going to be the starter. Now, he wasn't the starter when the year began because Justin Fields was playing and he got, well, it was really because Russ got hurt. But then once Russell Wilson got healthy, they put him back in and he was the starter the rest of the year. And the Steelers kind of negatively impacted themselves by doing that because now Justin Fields said, okay, well, you guys benched me when we had a winning record, so I'm going to go to a team that actually, is going to commit to me for a whole season. And that's the Jets. The Jets needed an upgrade at quarterback. Well, right now, because Tyrod Taylor, I would not have gone into the season with Tyrod Taylor as my starting quarterback. I just wouldn't. So, if Russ goes back to the Steelers, now I thought the book was closed on that because I thought Justin Fields, they're going to re-sign him. You keep hearing that Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, that's who the Steelers are zoning in on. Bring one of those two back. And most people thought it was going to be Justin Fields, but he ends up going to the Jets. So now that opens the door once again. That opens the book again to Russell Wilson. He can come back in. He was in the system last year. They brought over DK Metcalf, so Russ can throw some moon balls to him. So, yeah, it does make sense. And you get him for cheap. Now, of these two quarterbacks, I think Aaron Rodgers is better. Now, Aaron Rodgers is coming off of a down year, and a down year for him is 28 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, coming off of a major injury. Now, he is older than Russell Wilson. He's in his 40s. So, if the Steelers were to bring in Aaron Rodgers, you are getting an older quarterback, an even older quarterback. But I do think it would be an upgrade over Russell Wilson. Now, what we were talking about in our production meeting is George Pickens and DK Metcalf, not the best route runners. So it was talked about, like, yeah, maybe Russ would be the better fit because Russ can just throw up 50-50 balls to Pickens and DK Metcalf. That's true. But Aaron Rodgers still has the arm talent to throw up those 50-50 balls. And I feel like one way or another, the Steelers could still make it work. And you still got some other playmakers on that side of the ball, too. Now, maybe they add another receiver, or you're hoping that guys take the next step. Calvin Austin, like I've been saying, he showed some promise. We didn't see Roman Wilson play at all last year, really. The rookie wide receiver out of Michigan. Really didn't see anything out of him. So maybe you're hoping that in year 2 he could bounce back. The Steelers actually just signed Kenneth Gainwell today, I believe. But they did sign him. So you got him, and you're going to have Jaylen Warren. Now, I don't know if they're going to add any more to that running back room. So, and then, yeah, you got Pat Freiermuth, which I think, you pair Pat Freiermuth up with Aaron Rodgers, I think that would be good because, Pat Freiermuth is a good tight end, and Rodgers would benefit from that. But, and when it comes to the Steelers, when you're comparing the Steelers and the Giants, the Steelers give both these guys a better chance to win. They do. And right now, with Cleveland and their quarterback issues and the Bengals, and who knows what their defense is going to look like next year with Trey Hendrickson on the trade block, the Steelers, I think, are still the second best team in the division. So I think, and they always make the playoffs. They don't have a losing record. They never have a losing record with Mike Tomlin. So that's the better situation. But with the Giants, you pair up Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers with Malik Nabers. They re-signed Darius Slayton, which we'll talk about, which I was surprised that happened. They have some weapons on the offensive side of the ball, and Tyrone Tracy showed you promise. The problem is, and the Steelers, I think are in a, well, the Steelers are a young, up-and-coming offensive line. They just got to really grow and develop. The Giants, as long as Andrew Thomas could stay healthy, that line isn't that bad. But if Andrew Thomas goes down, the whole offensive line fell apart. That's why they brought in this tackle that they signed over from Cleveland, add some more depth there at that position. And I like what the Giants have done on the defensive side of the ball this offseason. Giants defense on paper is not bad. It's not. But it's a harder path. It's a much harder path. And it's a team coming off of 3 wins. And you're in a division with the Cowboys, the Commanders, and the Eagles. So ultimately, one of them is going to go there. Now, I think Russ is probably going to be the one that ends up with the Giants. I know I was kind of leaning towards maybe Aaron Rodgers is going to go there. But I feel like if Rodgers wants to win, he should go to the Steelers. But maybe money, they're not on the same page with that. Who knows? Maybe Rodgers wants to show the Jets, hey, I could still play. You guys made a mistake. And goes to the Giants, goes across the hall. But only time will tell. And then lastly, let's just get into Daniel Jones really quick. So the Colts signed him to a 1-year, $14 million deal to be competition to Anthony Richardson. Does that mean we're going to see Daniel Jones start some games next year? I think we definitely could. We definitely could. Because not only does Anthony Richardson have a chance to go out there and not play well and they bench him, but he could also get hurt and Daniel Jones could come in. But then again, you could say, well, Daniel Jones has had plenty of injuries. He could get hurt. And then what did the Colts do then? But they really wanted to bring in competition. They brought in Flacco last year, and that didn't really pan out. They didn't get the magic that they were hoping they would get with him, like how he played with the Browns. So they brought in a younger quarterback. And this is a better situation for Daniel Jones. I mean, how do you go back? If he went back to Minnesota, that would have been even better than the Colts. But the Colts, they have a very good running game with Jonathan Taylor. You got some good young receivers. So I think if he does start some games for them, I definitely think you could see a better version of Daniel Jones as opposed to what we've been seeing with the Giants. But let me know what you guys think about the quarterback stuff. Where do you think these guys will end up? Like I said, it's going to come down to the Giants and the Steelers. That's really the sense I'm getting. So we are going to take our first break. When we come back, we will talk about all the wide receiver deals and where Cooper Kupp could potentially end up because the Rams are going to release him and he will be out on the open market. So with that being said, stick around and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we are now going to talk about the wide receiver deals that have happened over the course of this free agency signing period. And recently, we had some new deals. DeAndre Hopkins signed a 1-year deal with the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens, they needed another pass catcher. And, he spent some time with the Titans the last couple of years and got traded to the Chiefs mid-season. And he did have that big drop in the Super Bowl that maybe he catches that. Maybe, the game looks a little bit different because, that was a big play in the game. And maybe the Chiefs would have scored some points on that drive, and who knows. But, the way the Eagles were playing, it really wouldn't have mattered. But, yeah, so Hopkins, he signs a 1-year deal, not for that much, only $6 million. And, look, he's not the same player that he once was. We understand that. But I do think he at least helps. And you look at his numbers from last season with the Titans before he got traded. 15 receptions, 173 yards, and a touchdown. He was banged up before the year started. He probably was still banged up throughout the year. But with the Chiefs, he had 41 receptions for 437 yards and 4 touchdowns. I do think where DeAndre Hopkins can help the Ravens out is, being a red zone threat. A guy that Lamar Jackson can throw the ball up to and make a nice catch. He could still do that. Now, like I said, he had that drop in the Super Bowl, but that's an area where I could see him thriving. Now, the Ravens do have Zay Flowers. They have Mark Andrews. I saw there's some rumors out there that being floated around that maybe they could trade Mark Andrews, but I'll have to believe it when I see it. Now, they do have a young tight end waiting behind him, and that's Isaiah Likely. So Isaiah Likely would step in. But right now, you still got Mark Andrews. You got Zay Flowers. Rashad Bateman as well. Rashad Bateman's coming off of a good year after they gave him a contract extension. And, of course, when you get near the goal line, you have Lamar Jackson, but you do also have Derrick Henry. So Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins reunited after they spent 1 year together in Tennessee. So I'm okay with it. He's like the number 3 wide receiver for the Ravens now. And I think that's fine. It's not for that much money, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't really affect them. It's for 1 year. So I do like that move for the Ravens, but I don't think that's like a significant needle mover. So along with DeAndre Hopkins, you also had Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin signed a 3-year deal with the Buccaneers, to re-sign with the Buccaneers. $66 million, $44 million guaranteed with a max value of $72 million with incentives. Now, I was a little surprised by this. And I just want to say, I know in the past I've said nothing surprises me, but I'm kind of lying, I guess. But Chris Godwin, before he got hurt, he was playing really well. And it looked like he was on his way to having his best career season. But then he gets hurt towards the end of that Ravens game. Many people were upset with Todd Bowles for not pulling him because the Buccaneers were playing catch-up to the Ravens. And they left all their starters in. And Mike Evans got hurt in that game with the hamstring injury, but that was early on in the game. And then Godwin got hurt towards the end. So Godwin did only play 7 games. He had 576 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. But he could have had his best season. Maybe close to what he had in 2019. Or better than 2019. Because 2019 he finished with 9 touchdowns. He had 1,300 yards. He had 121 targets, 65 receptions. He had 50 receptions. And he had 5, and like I said, he had 5 touchdowns. But he comes back, and you got him, you got Mike Evans, and you got Jalen McMillan, who really stepped up in Godwin's absence. So I think that's good for the Buccaneers getting him back. And his best game, on the year, it probably came against it came against the Saints. He had 11 receptions, 125 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So yeah, I mean, really for the Bucs, I think it's about improving that defense. And they signed Hassan Reddick to a 1-year deal, so hopefully he can have a better year than he did last year with the Jets. He gets some more pass rush. Because you have Vita Vea up the middle. But you need, guys on the outside that can get to the passer. And they do have some young pass rushers on that team. But I think that's really what the Bucs have to address, is the defense. Go defensive heavy. Because you got 3 really good wide receivers. Well, I shouldn't say really good, but you have 2 really good wide receivers and, an up-and-coming wide receiver. Let's see what Jalen McMillan does in year 2. Because Mike Evans, Hall of Famer. Chris Godwin, very good receiver. Also a Super Bowl champion with the Bucs. And then look at the running game. Bucky Irving, how well he played last year. With Rachaad White, Baker Mayfield looked good in Tampa these last couple of years. The defense is where they need to improve. So that's something to keep an eye on during the draft. But bringing back Godwin, I'm a fan of it. Darius Slayton, this one was a little bit of a head scratcher. So the Giants re-signed Darius Slayton to a 3-year, $36 million contract. Now he's coming off of a year where he had 39 receptions for 573 yards and 2 touchdowns. I thought he was gone. I did not think he was coming back to the Giants. And why would he want to come back to the Giants? He's been on some bad teams since he got drafted back in 2019. But he wants to stay. He wants to be a Giant. And if the Giants could get better quarterback play, maybe he can have a better year. And it would not surprise me if the Giants do end up trading Jalen Hyatt. That would not surprise me. I feel like that could happen at some point. But you know what? I give Slayton credit. It shows that, in a world where loyalty is not like what it was in sports, there are some players that are still loyal. And also he did get a good deal for himself. So I give him credit for that, but I don't know. I would have been okay with the Giants maybe moving off of him. But you could also say, what else would have been out there? What free agent was interested to come into the Giants that would have been better than Slayton? And there are still receivers out there, but would they want to come to the Giants? The Chiefs re-signed Marquise Brown to a 1-year, $11 million deal. That happened, before all the craziness. But, that's good, bringing him back, especially with, Rashee Rice coming off of injury. You need another weapon there. And I thought the Chiefs looked a lot better when they got him back. Obviously, then the Super Bowl happened. But, cheap deal, a full year of being healthy. He puts up better numbers. Joshua Palmer signed a 3-year, $36 million deal with the Bills. I mean, he's kind of the Mac Hollins replacement. So we'll see. And speaking of Mac Hollins, he signed a 2-year, $8.4 million deal with the Pats. Patriots needed more weapons on offense, and he's coming off of his best season, led the Bills in touchdown receptions. So that gives Drake May another weapon, but they still need to upgrade there. Patriots have made a lot of moves, but they've been mainly on defense. So now we go to who is left when talking about the free agent wide receivers. So Cooper Kupp is going to be one of them. Where is he going to end up? You hear Jacksonville could be a possibility. I know Dallas, there was a rumor floating around that maybe Dallas could be in on him, but I feel like a lot of people are going to say Jerry's not going to want to sign him. Jerry's not going to open his wallet for Cooper Kupp. It's going to be interesting to see where he could go. But looking at some of the other wide receivers, Stephon Diggs is still out there. Keenan Allen is still out there. Amari Cooper is still out there. Tyler Lockett, Brandon Cooks, Mike Williams, Robert Woods. There's still some names out there that could help out a contender that maybe needs another receiver. We'll keep an eye on it. Diggs is probably, other than Cooper Kupp, I would probably say Diggs is like the next big name that's out there. And Keenan Allen's been talking about, either going back to LA or going back to the Bears. The Chargers, they didn't address the receiver position yet. They brought in Najee Harris to improve the running game. Well, they brought him in as a replacement of J.K. Dobbins. It could be argued whether or not he improves it or not. But Keenan Allen is out there. They want to bring him in on a cheap deal. Or maybe Harbaugh wants to continue to build through the draft. If not, Keenan Allen's going back to the Bears. And I think he should, because I think the Bears are going to be better next year. But that's my opinion. So, let me know what you guys think, though, about the wide receiver deals. What was your favorite? What was a head-scratcher for you? Let me know in the comments. I would say the Darius Slayton one was a bit of a head-scratcher, but listen, if the Giants can get stability at the quarterback position in some way, shape, or form, and Slayton had that good game against Seattle. Darius Slayton has had some big games, but it's kind of inconsistent. But you could also say it's because of the quarterback play with the Giants. So before we go to break, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate, get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So, when we come back from our next break, we will talk about the Eagles and the moves that have been made, guys that have departed in free agency, some trades that they've made, and how that's going to impact the team. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are going to talk about the Eagles and the players that they have lost. Should we be concerned with the Eagles and the players that they have lost? Because they've lost a handful of players now since the free agent window opened up. So Josh Sweat, he ended up signing a contract with the Cardinals. They also cut Darius Slay. They traded C.J. Gardner-Johnson to the Texans. Darius Slay ended up signing with the Steelers. Milton Williams ended up signing with the Patriots. Orlin Burks, he signed with the Bengals. Isaiah Rodgers, a corner, he signed with the Vikings. So, yeah, the defense is going to look a little different next year. But should we be concerned? Should we be concerned? The answer is no. We should not be concerned. I don't think Eagles fans are really sweating it. To be honest, let's ask ourselves a question. For some of you that aren't expert, well, again, I'm not an expert on the Eagles either. Let's ask ourselves, did we know who Milton Williams was before the Super Bowl? Did we know who he was? I knew who Josh Sweat was. But did we know who Milton Williams was? We know who Jalen Carter is. Milton Williams had a very good Super Bowl performance. I think he had, what did he have in the Super Bowl? He had 2.5 sacks of Patrick Mahomes. Let's do a quick little fact check, shall we? So we go back to the Super Bowl. And Milton Williams, no, he didn't have 2.5 sacks. He had 2 sacks and a forced fumble. That was a good Super Bowl performance. Josh Sweat had 2.5 sacks in the Super Bowl. But we didn't know who Milton Williams was. The vast majority of people are not going to know who he is. So they're fine there. And you still got Jalen Carter. And they also have Jordan Davis still. They still got those key guys up the middle. So I think you could replace him. Josh Sweat, you know who I think they're ultimately going to replace him with? I really do believe this. I think that they're going to trade for Trey Hendrickson. I really do think that is what's going to happen. I could be wrong, but that's going to be the pivot. He was a sack leader last year. You put him on that defensive line with Carter and Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith, you could say that's an upgrade over Josh Sweat. So they can replace him. They traded C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and they ended up getting in return for him, if I can find the trade alert for that. And there's just so many moves have been made. So C.J. Gardner-Johnson, they ended up getting a draft pick for him. And so they traded C.J. Gardner-Johnson and a 6th-round pick in exchange for an offensive guard in Kenyon Green and a 5th-round pick. So they got another offensive lineman in the trade. And I guess he's going to be the Mekhi Becton replacement. So that's what they got in the deal. And then you got Darius Slay and James Bradbury. Those guys have been released. Slay went and signed with the Steelers. Isaiah Rodgers, another corner. He went to the Vikings. James Bradbury just got released. We'll see where he ends up. And also Avonte Maddox is on the free agent market as well. Are we concerned about that? No, because the Eagles, they went and drafted 2 very good corners in Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. They're going to be fine. We got those guys in the secondary. Now, the other reason why I think the Eagles are going to be fine is because, look, you just won the Super Bowl, and their front office is arguably the best front office in football. With the level of talent that they've brought in and how they evaluate free agency. Look at what they did last year. They brought in Saquon Barkley. That was a big move. But then there were some of the under-the-radar moves that you didn't expect would make a significant impact. And that's Zach Bond and the guy that I just said, the player that they acquired in the C.J. Gardner-Johnson deal to replace him, Mekhi Becton. Mekhi Becton, they moved him on the interior of the offensive line, and he played really well. Zach Bond had an interception in the Super Bowl. He was an All-Pro. Was up for Defensive Player of the Year. And they brought him back. The Eagles are smart. Now, they did sign Bryce Huff from the Jets, and he really didn't do anything. Devin White, they brought in. They got rid of him. But no one cares about that. The Eagles are going to be okay. a lot of these guys that they let go are replaceable. Josh Sweat hurts, but I think, like I said, it would not surprise me if they go out and they trade for Trey Hendrickson. And you still got that offense. You still got that offensive line. You got the Super Bowl MVP. You got Barkley. You got that receiving core. Dallas Goedert maybe could be on the trade block. And then Calcaterra, I guess, could be his replacement. Because he's filled in for him when he got hurt. Eagles are going to be okay. Even with them, letting guys go and, guys departing in free agency, they're going to be fine. It's a lot of the guys that they lost were depth pieces. Now you just got to improve your depth again. And I think, through the draft, and, we'll see if they make some other signings, they will replace those guys. I mean, Darius Slay, we knew going into the Super Bowl that this was probably his last game as an Eagle, that was going to be his last game as an Eagle. James Bradbury has been a disappointment compared to the first year. And like I said, Milton Williams, to be honest, didn't know who that was before the Super Bowl. You still got Jalen Carter and Davis. They will be fine. They will be fine. Now, you do worry a little bit with the Commanders, because the Commanders are getting better. And I think they're slowly but surely narrowing the gap. Still think the Eagles are better. Eagles are the best team in the division still. But Commanders gave them a tough time last year. Now, the Eagles, beat up on them in the championship game. But a lot of that had to do with turnovers as well. And the Commanders just couldn't stop them on defense. And I think that's where the Commanders are going to have to be aggressive with. Another team. Defense. Or maybe they're a team that trades for Trey Hendrickson too. You never know. A lot of teams were in on Myles Garrett. But the Eagles, look, they got to the Super Bowl against the Patriots in 2017. They won it. The team that won the Super Bowl against the Chiefs a month ago, you had Lane Johnson, Brandon Graham. That's it. And Jake Elliott. I think those are the only players. They'll figure it out. They will find replacements for the guys that they lost. So that's really my thoughts on the Eagles. Look, they still got the most important players on the team. Now, Brandon Graham is retiring, and he actually retore his triceps. Because if you remember, that happened during the regular season, and then he came back for the Super Bowl, and then he ended up tearing them again. But hey, he ended up getting the Super Bowl ring out of it. So he's okay with it. But that's another, veteran on the team that's leaving, and I think for Eagles fans, for them it's sad. Because, you had to say goodbye to Kelsey and Fletcher Cox last year. And then now Brandon Graham. And then at some point Lane Johnson's going to leave and retire. I mean, he said not anytime soon. But it's coming. And it'll be nice, when he retires as well. Because, maybe the Giants can actually, sack the quarterback. Not saying that they haven't gotten to Jalen Hurts. But I'm just, I'm just trolling trolling the Giants. But if there's any front office that could figure this out, it's the Eagles. They'll be okay. But I don't think there's really anyone out there. I mean, if you're an Eagles fan and you're watching this, are you really concerned by the players that you lost? Now, if they lost, like, let's say Saquon Barkley and, A.J. Brown and they lose, Cooper DeJean and Jalen Carter. If you lost all those guys in the offseason, well, yeah, then you got to be a little bit concerned. But I think with the guys you look at now, you look at the list and you see the names and you're like, yeah, they lost a lot of pieces. But they are replaceable. A lot of those guys are replaceable. But let me know what you guys think about what players the Eagles have lost. About the players the Eagles have lost. How do you feel about it? Who do you think they could bring in to replace some of these guys? Whether it's through the draft or free agency, let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our next break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about the 49ers. We will do a season overview on their season and also talk about the players that they have lost in free agency, some of the players that they have let go, and what's going to happen. So with that being said, make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, and for the fourth part of the show, we are now going to do our season overview on the San Francisco 49ers. I'm also going to talk about the moves that they have made so far, letting go of guys and also guys just leaving in free agency, and the impact of that. So similar to the Eagles, but the 49ers, so going into the year, I thought this team was going to be a lot better, as many other people did. I thought this team was going to win, I think, 12 to 13 games. But they dealt with a ton of injuries this year to everybody, basically. Whether it was on the defensive side of the ball, the offensive side of the ball, everywhere. I think even their kicker, right? I think even Jake Moody was hurt. But also when, in some of his games, he did not kick the ball well. But yeah, Brock Purdy missed some time late in the season. Christian McCaffrey was hurt basically the whole year, came back, and then ended up getting hurt in the snow game against Buffalo. And then he ended up being out the rest of the season, dealing with the Achilles injury. And then, Jordan Mason, who was his replacement, he was running the football well, was the leading rusher in the NFL early on in the season, one of the top leading rushers. He gets hurt. You had Isaac Guerrero. He also got hurt. Who was their other running back? Deebo Samuel was hurt. Brandon Ayuk tore his ACL. George Kittle missed some time. Trent Williams, Nick Bosa, you name it. Just everybody you could think of, for the most part, missed time. And you kind of got the sense that maybe this season was not going to go right with all the Brandon Ayuk stuff. Because I got to tell you, when I was doing the football podcast the whole summer, the spring into the summer, and just every day having to talk about, basically talking about Brandon Ayuk, I was getting tired of it. Because nothing was happening. You heard, they had a conversation. He showed up to practice. And they talked, and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting. When is he going to make a decision? When are they going to figure this out? Then they finally come to an agreement. And before he got hurt, he really wasn't playing that well. He ended up having no touchdowns on the year. He ended up finishing with 374 yards and 25 receptions. That's it. Didn't do that much. And, the rookie draft pick Ricky Pearsall, he had the situation that happened with him where, he was recovering from a gunshot wound. So he didn't even start the year. You end up getting him back, and he had 3 touchdowns, 400 yards receiving, and you're hoping that, a full year now of training camp and preseason, if he plays, I'm assuming he would. You start the regular season, he's going to be a big part of this offense next year. So you had that happen as well. And then, throughout the season, like I said, a ton of injuries. Deebo Samuel, probably his worst year in the NFL. Missed some time due to injury. He had pneumonia at one point, but also he just looked like he was not the same player. Drops were a problem. Really was not making an impact on the game. And you had him going to social media and tweeting about his involvement in the game. The 49ers tried to get him the ball. Dropped that touchdown against the Rams late in the season. And now they ended up trading him to the Commanders. So he gets a fresh start there, and we'll see if he bounces back. George Kittle had a very good year. George Kittle ended up being their leading receiver. He had 1,106 receiving yards, 78 receptions. He had 8 touchdowns. He missed some time too, but he was very good. He was their most consistent weapon. Juwan Jennings, at times, was good. He fell a little bit short of 1,000 yards, 975 receiving yards. He did have 6 touchdowns. He had that monster game early on in the season against the Rams. He had 3 touchdowns in that game. He had 11 receptions for 175 yards and 3 touchdowns. Brock Purdy, 3,800 yards passing, 20 touchdowns to 12 picks. Not as good of a year as 2023. And like I said, Jordan Mason ended up finishing as our leading rusher, 789 yards and 3 touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey, when he came back, he finished with 202 rushing yards and 146 receiving yards, but he had no touchdowns. And you're hoping that he comes back and he's healthy next year. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Fred Warner was probably their best player, and he was playing hurt. 131 total tackles, 1 sack, 4 forced fumbles. It's a tongue twister there. And he had a pick 6 as well against the Patriots. But, Jake Moody, 24 of 34 on field goals for about 70%. That's not good. He's got to be better there. And then he was 32 of 33 on extra points. He was 6 of 11 on field goals that were between 40 and 49 yards. And then he was 4 for 9 on 50-plus field goals. 50-plus yard field goals. It's not good. And for the Niners, last place in the NFC West. You would not think that was going to happen going into the year. And against the division, they were not great. I think they only won one divisional game. They ended up winning only one divisional game, and that was against the Seahawks in Week 6 on that Thursday night. They beat the Jets in Week 1. Then you lose in Minnesota, and they've had a problem winning in Minnesota the last couple of years. And I actually, took the Vikings with the points in that game, but I still thought the Niners would win. They ended up losing. Then they lost to the Rams. That was a game that they should have won. The Rams scored 13 points in the fourth quarter, and they ended up winning 27-24. And they didn't have Kupp or Nakua in that game. Now, the 49ers were also missing a ton of guys, too. But the 49ers should have won that game. They beat up on the Patriots. They lose to the Cardinals late. They lost the Super Bowl rematch to the Chiefs. So going into the bye week, they had the bye week, Week 9. They were going in at 3-4. So, and we've seen the 49ers in years past where they start off slow, but then, they have a second half run in them. And you thought once they got McCaffrey back, that was going to be the case. But, yeah, so they beat Tampa, and then they proceed to lose their next 3 games. They lose at home against the Seahawks in the final seconds when Geno Smith scrambled for that touchdown. Also, Nick Bosa got hurt in that game. But then Brock Purdy ends up missing the next game against the Packers. And Lamb, I don't think it really would have made much of a difference, but they didn't have him. They were missing a lot of guys. I don't think Trent Williams played. They didn't have Purdy. They didn't have Nick Bosa. They were missing a lot of guys, and the Packers won 38-10. You had Brandon Allen starting. They won 38-10. And then the following week, McCaffrey gets hurt, and they lose 35-10 to the Bills in Buffalo. Josh Allen, scores 2 touchdowns on one play, a passing touchdown and a receiving touchdown. But then they bounce back. They beat up on the Bears 38-13, and you think, all right, maybe with their backs against the wall, they got a run in them. That didn't happen. They end up losing that ugly game on that Thursday night against the Rams, 12-6. Debo drops that touchdown. There was not a single touchdown in that game. Then they lose to the Dolphins, and then they lose the NFC Championship game rematch with the Lions. And the 49ers, their offense was good in that game, but it didn't matter. They could not stop the Lions. Ricky Pearsall actually had a good game. 8 receptions for 141 yards and a touchdown. But then Purdy got hurt in that game. He ended up not playing in the final game of the regular season, and the Cardinals beat them up 47-24. Josh Dobbs, he started that game. And yeah, so they finished 6-11. And now, going into this offseason, this is what's gone on so far. So they traded Deebo Samuel to the Commanders. And then they also recently cut Kyle Juszczyk. You saw a couple of offensive linemen leave in free agency. Jalen Moore, who was the backup to Trent Williams, he went to the Chiefs. Elijah Mitchell also went to the Chiefs. Aaron Banks went to the Packers, a guard. But you also saw in the secondary and in the defense in general, you saw Charvarius Ward go to the Colts. Wanted a change of scenery. He left and went there. You also saw Ufanga and Dre Greenlaw. They both went to the Broncos. So they lost those guys. And like I said, they cut Kyle Juszczyk. Josh Dobbs signed with the Patriots, but, backup quarterback. They could find someone to replace him. So the 49ers are going to look different. Now, I think similar to the Eagles, when you look at a lot of these guys that left, Deebo Samuel, I think it was okay with trading him. Now, who knows what they're going to do with Brandon Ayuk, because they could trade him. But you got Ayuk, you got Pearsall, you got Jennings, you got George Kittle. I think they're still okay at receiver. Maybe they draft one. You hope that Christian McCaffrey comes back. Elijah Mitchell did not play at all last year. The 49ers have a ton of running backs. You hope Christian McCaffrey is healthy next year. But I don't worry about that. Like I said, Josh Dobbs, backup quarterback. I do think, though, even though these guys were hurt last year, Dre Greenlaw came back late in the season. You kind of figured the 49ers were going to move off of him. They actually, another move that they made, they also cut Leonard Floyd, too. And, he was one of their top guys when it came to sacks last year. I think he had 8.5 sacks last year. So there's that. But I think they'll be able to replace him, right? Yeah, he had 8.5 sacks last season. And then you got Nick Bosa, who had 9. But actually also Malik Collins is another guy that left as well. But yeah, the 49ers are going to look a little different next year. I do think some of these guys they will be able to replace. The secondary is definitely going to need some work. Maybe that's a position that they address is corner. But on top of that, you also have to deal with the Brock Purdy contract extension. That's coming. And we're going to see what Brock Purdy is made of with, this team not being the same as it was a couple years ago. You still have your weapons. You got to hope that they stay healthy. But yeah, the 49ers are not going to be that same team going into 2025 that we've been accustomed to seeing. Are they going to be able to bounce back? I think they can. but I think right now the Rams are the best team. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if they can bounce back. But this is a big year for them. And we'll see if they can overcome last year's struggles and injuries. So we are going to take our final break of the show now. And then when we come back, we're going to talk some baseball. We're going to talk about the Yankees losing Gerrit Cole for the year. And really for the next year and a half. So, for one final... Sorry about that. So for one final time today, make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are going to take a break from all the football madness. It's kind of like we're doing the football podcast again, but we are going to talk about something that's a big deal in another sport, and that's baseball, talking about the Yankees losing Gerrit Cole for the year. I did see something on social media that, the Rams releasing Cooper Kupp, a team that you can maybe watch out for to sign him, possibly, again, it's just a rumor, is the Vikings. I was reading, the coaching staff supposedly loves Cooper Kupp. If they have the cap space to bring him in, make him that third option. Imagine an offense with Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson. I mean, obviously Kupp is not, he's been injured the last few years, but still, you get him on a cheap deal with them two, Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson. If it's J.J. McCarthy starting, he is going to have an embarrassment of riches at wide receiver. But I just wanted to bring that up. Also, I apologize that my laptop was glitching out a little bit before, and that's why, when I was trying to go to the next commercial that we play during our break, I ended up clicking on one of the other graphics. So I apologize for that. But anyways, let's talk some baseball. So, the Yankees, they lose Gerrit Cole for the year to Tommy John surgery. So, last week, I, was scrolling through, so I open up Instagram on my phone, and the first thing I see is a picture of Gerrit Cole, and it was a post by one of the Yankee fan accounts that I follow. And I knew right away Gerrit Cole's hurt. And once I read that and I saw elbow, I knew it's not good. Because he dealt with an elbow injury last year, but they were able to manage through it. It wasn't, the worst case scenario. Gerrit Cole ended up missing some time, but he was able to come back and, pitched okay in the regular season, but he was great in the postseason. And you do have to wonder, him throwing 99 miles an hour in that Game 5 to try to get out of that jam. That's why we're where we are right now. He emptied the tank in that World Series. Just like Giancarlo Stanton. He emptied the tank in that postseason, and now both of those guys, two key contributors to the Yankees' World Series run last year, are not going to be a factor. Stanton could come back, but Cole is not going to be a factor in 2025, and you're not going to see him until probably next summer. And it just, not only does it stink for the Yankees, but it just stinks for baseball. Because Gerrit Cole is one of the best pitchers in baseball. And pitchers are just going down left and right. It's been happening for a long time. But the body can't handle, throwing 99 miles an hour and, throwing these different ways of pitches. And, once Gerrit Cole dealt with the elbow injury last year, I was hoping that maybe the Yankees would have got past it, but it reared its ugly head, and I knew the Yankees were not going to get lucky twice, and he's going to go and get Tommy John. And this spring training has really put a damper on what was, I thought, a productive offseason for the Yankees after losing Juan Soto. They went out, they got Cody Bellinger, who I think could be in for a good season for them. Not going to be Juan Soto, but I think he can have a good year. Paul Goldschmidt has looked okay in the spring. You brought in Max Fried. Max Fried is really going to have to step up now. He is now the de facto ace for the Yankees pitching staff. And then they also went out and they got Devin Williams, one of the best closers in baseball. Yankees bullpen is going to be good. Their defense is going to be improved. But there are still a lot of ifs with this team. The young guys have to step up. Who's going to be playing third base? Who's going to DH now with Giancarlo Stanton being out? There's a lot of ifs. And on top of that, you lose Gerrit Cole, but now you also have lost Luis Gil before that. But at least Luis Gil maybe could come back at some point later in the season. But now you're looking at a rotation with Max Fried, Carlos Rodon, Marcus Stroman, Will Warren now is going to be in the rotation possibly, or Carlos Carrasco, and I forgot to mention Clark Schmidt. And when you look at the landscape of the American League is weak. So the Yankees, I think, could still make the playoffs, but I do think that this brings them back down to the pack. With all the injuries that have happened, I think this does put a dent in their chances of winning the American League East, because I do think, the Red Sox are better. You still have the Orioles to worry about. The Blue Jays, we'll see what happens. They could be better this year. And the Rays are always a team that, gives the Yankees a hard time. And the Red Sox are always a team that gives the Yankees a hard time. And now the Red Sox are better. So this could be a challenging year for the Yankees. Going into the year, this is kind of like the 2013 season, in my opinion, because the Yankees dealt with a ton of injuries beforehand. Derek Jeter was hurt, A-Rod, Teixeira, Curtis Granderson. All these guys were hurt. And I saw a lineup that they trotted out there that year, and I'm like, yep, I remember. And they won 85 games. I could definitely see that happening this year. And you gotta hope that Aaron Judge does not get hurt. Because if Aaron Judge gets hurt, it's 2023 all over again. And the thing that really upsets me is they just are continuing to waste the prime years of Aaron Judge because they haven't won anything. And now Gerrit Cole, this probably shuts the door in his prime. Now, he could come back and be like Justin Verlander and win a Cy Young like Justin Verlander did. Maybe they do win a World Series with Gerrit Cole when he comes back. But the way things have been going as of late, I don't know. But you look at the years 2022 through 2024, right? 2022, Aaron Judge wins an MVP. They get to the championship series. They get swept by Houston. 2023, Gerrit Cole wins the Cy Young. They don't even make the playoffs that year. And then last year, you have the MVP in Aaron Judge. You have Juan Soto. And you also had Rookie of the Year, Luis Gil. and you got to the World Series. Now, Luisio really didn't factor that much into the post. I mean, he did make a start in the championship series and in the World Series. But again, he won Rookie of the Year. That was another Yankee that won an award. And they lost in the World Series to the Dodgers. Now this year, you lose Juan Soto, and now you've lost Giancarlo Stanton, who had a big postseason, and you lost Gerrit Cole, who was your ace. And you also lost Luisio for an extended period of time. So can the Yankees get up from this? Can they make the playoffs? Absolutely. But are they World Series contenders? Absolutely not. They're not. I think they're a wild card team at best right now. That's how I feel. The pessimistic side of me as a Yankee fan has reared its ugly head. But that's where we're at. I do think that, they can make a move at some point. Everyone's talking about Sandy Alcantara from the Marlins, and, you look at some of the free agents out there, Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, and, the Padres with Dylan Cease and Michael King. The Padres are going to be good. I don't think they're going to trade them. I mean, if they're bad, maybe the Yankees try to get Michael King back. That would be great. But also, because the Yankees are desperate, teams are going to say, hey, we want Dominguez, we want Spencer Jones, we want all these top prospects. And the Yankees really don't have a deep farm system. I think they were ranked like 24th. They're not going to be looking to trade away those guys. So it's tough right now. And also people keep floating the idea of Trevor Bauer. Enough. He's been out of baseball for years now. Nobody is signing him. Give it up. Give it a rest. It's not happening. But Brian Cashman recently said there's not a lot that's out there. And they said that a lot of the issues that they're going to solve with is solving it internally. So, yeah, I mean, at the trade deadline, I would expect them to do something. But they're also going to let this play out. And if this team is really struggling in the rotation, they're going to have to make a move. Because Marcus Stroman, I really think he's going to be bad this year. He was good in the first half of the year, but then he kind of fell off. He's a guy that relies on location. And if he's not locating his pitches properly, I mean, we've seen it. If you watch spring training, if you watch some of his starts with the Yankees and, even going back to last year, he gives up home runs. And he's a ground ball pitcher. That's why the Yankees got him. But it's not going to matter. The ball's going to be going in the seats. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I am worried about the Yankees' rotation. I'm definitely worried about it. Max Fried's going to have to step up. Thankfully, the Yankees brought him in. Rodon was good in the postseason. That stretch in July was brutal. But hopefully, he steps up. Clark Schmidt hopefully can stay healthy. That's the other thing, too, is I think the Yankees are going to see even more injuries. I don't think it's going to stop with the guys that they've lost already. I think they're going to lose even more guys. But again, I hope I am wrong. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think, though, about the Cole injury and the impact of that. And that is pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well. Make sure to subscribe to both YouTube channels. Make sure to leave a like and comment on the video. Greatly appreciate that. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit.